Hello, everybody. This is Jenny with the Revival of America, owner and the host. Oh, sorry. Hi, everybody. This is Jenny with the Revival of America, owner and the host. I would like to I am so tongue-tied right now, guys. I don't even know what happened right now. I just wasn't prepared. But anyway, we have SG in the house today, everybody. So please, if you guys have a question for SG, feel free to raise your hand or write your question underneath his logo on the wall with a Q in front of it. Also, too, if you come into the podcast late, you can follow the podcast on the podcast hosts, which are iHeartRadio, Spotify, Anchor, Apple, Google, Breaker, PocketCast, Podbean, Riverside, Amazon Music. Social medias are Jenny Jeread Facebook, at Jenny_Jeread X, at JJeread Rumble, at JJeread True Social, at JJeread Instagram. The Revival of America right here on Telegram, and the Revival of America over on YouTube. And then, of course, over there on TikTok at the official JJeread. Also, everybody, please be careful who you listen to, who you follow, what you put into your mind. It's a wild, wild west out there, everybody. But we knew this was coming. We knew this was going to happen. It's a good thing for those of you that are out there kind of wondering who to listen to or who to follow. It's happening. A lot of these influencers, podcasters are getting called out. They're going to the wayside. So pay attention to that, everybody, because it will be easier for you to figure out who to follow. Stick and stay, people, with the people that haven't led you wrong through the course of your journey. It could be 3 to 5 people. Just tighten up the circle. That's what I tell a lot of the people that I talk to. Tighten up that circle. It's not about following all these people or groups anymore. It's about getting the right information. If they're consistent in what they're telling you, then you're more than likely on the right track. When they start flip-flopping the script, when they get defensive, when you ask them a question, you kind of know right then and there. I was just in a space right now, so I was coming out of that space right now, everybody, to come over here. So they were talking about the Fed, so I was a little bit still have that in my brain. So I apologize for me being a little bit tongue-tied here in the beginning of this, but yeah, they were just talking about some individuals that happen to pop into that space, and what they do is they cause a little chaos, if you will. They expose themselves real quickly because you ask the questions they can't answer, and then you really start to see these. You can point these guys out really quickly. So please, everybody, if your mind isn't strong enough, don't go in those chats, don't go in the comment boxes, don't go there. Just get out of it. If it doesn't resonate, just bounce out, okay? Because it's not worth it. There's a lot of noise. There's a lot of minutia going on out there. A lot of bullshit. A lot of bullshit shit being spread about Trump and his administration, and coming from the people that you thought, oh, okay, you like this individual. Well, maybe not so much now anymore. So just be careful, everybody. Also, too, the scammers are out there sending out the DMs. Asking people if they're ready for the scare events, the finances, crypto, nothing new. We've been talking about this for a long time. If you get something like that, somebody pretending to be me, let me know. No, it's not me. I will not randomly reach out to you. I will I will respond to an email if you send me an email, but I'm not going to randomly reach out to you and ask you if you're ready for any of those things. So please block, report them. Let me know. I can make sure that they're not here in my channel. Also, to everybody, go sign up for the newsletter. It is free at at the revivalofamerica.com. That's where the newsletter is. Sign up for that. You'll get the updates on the notifications on the latest podcast, as well as the weekly updates on the guests, the times, and where I'm going to be hosting the shows, whether it be here at Telegram or will it be over on my X space. So do that. Again, that's the revivalofamerica.com. And for submissions, if you have a story or a journey to tell, please feel free to send those to TROA submissions at yahoo.com. Give me a little synopsis of your story. We do vet these because unfortunately we have the scammers that want to try to make up BS stories as well and get their voice and a fake story on the show. So that's unfortunate, but yes, we do have those people out there as well. So please, TROA submissions at yahoo.com, and then I will reach out to you, and it will be your voice that will tell your story. It's more authentic, it's legit, and it's better coming from you anyway than from me, because I wasn't the one that went through that journey, right? So please know that I am getting a lot of submissions, and people are telling me their entire story, which I love. Thank you so much for sending me those. But if that is you, if that's one of you people, please reach out to me again. Let me know if you're wanting me to tell the story, because that's not what I'm trying to do. I want you to tell your story. So if you want to tell your story, please feel free to reach out to me again. We'll get you on the show. Or if you're just letting me know what your journey, your story was, I appreciate it. Thank you so much. I do save these stories because I'll tell you, everybody, it's your journey, your journeys, your stories that are going to help shape this new world that we're coming into. So I encourage all of you, please use your voices. It is time. People need to hear the truth. So with that, everybody, we'll kick back. We'll wait for SG. He has about 50 minutes of his time. He has another function to go to this evening. So if you guys have questions for him, please be mindful when you raise your hand to try to come up and speak as quick as you can, because that way it will allow other people to come up as well. So hang tight, everybody. We'll get started shortly as soon as he pops into the space to the room here. Also, everybody, another thing I wanted to tell you, please, when I say tighten up your circle, be careful who you follow. Again, I tell you all the time, follow Trump, follow his Truth Social account. He is literally telling us, he is telling us more now than ever. He posted something this morning that be calm in the storm. We knew this day was coming. He was posting a slur of things, and he has been here a lot lately. So more so than ever, not so cryptic, not so coded, but he's telling us, everybody, he's telling us to stay calm. So don't listen to the fear mongering out there, because there's a lot of that going on out there as well. But really, if it's too much to try to follow so many people or one or two people, if anything, follow Donald Trump, because he is really putting it out there and letting you know. And kind of like what he's doing right now, he's going scorched earth on Jerome Powell. What is he doing? Is he putting him in the spotlight? Because I think we're going to see some. I think we're going to see some rumbling here with that situation as well, which we want. But again, if you're questioning who to follow, definitely for sure Donald Trump, follow him, because again, he's letting us know what's going on. So again, it's I would say Truth Social. That's where he posts the most. So that's where I'm going to be posting a lot from, is his Truth Social account. All right, everybody. SG just messaged me. He should be in here shortly. So hang in there, guys. A lot of good stuff happening, everybody. A lot of good stuff happening. So hang on to the positive, not the negative. A lot of people tend to hang on to the negative and forget about all the positive and winning that we are doing. There's a ton of winning going on right now. I don't, if you're paying attention to this EU deal that Trump just came back from Scotland on, it's one of the biggest deals in human history. So there's a lot to it. Do your research into it. I'm going to have SG talk a little bit about that as well. But a lot of great stuff happening, everybody. More winning than there is losing. So just know that. And there's just a lot of that noise out there. So please, again, be careful. Trump did also post, or the White House posted the Golden Age, August 1st, a great day for America. And he's asking everybody, are you ready for August 1st? So that's good. That's good stuff. Let's see what else. I'm sitting here looking. We've got some good stuff. Silk put out also too, General Flynn was vindicated by the Obamagate bombshell. So that's going to be coming out. I think they're setting him up for a trap with what's about to happen. So we're going to talk about these things when SG gets in here. So please, if you guys have some questions, don't be afraid. Oh, here's a question for any of you. If you guys want to raise your hand, I know we had the tsunami, the earthquake, and all of that stuff. There is. Never mind, guys. Maybe we'll talk about that. Hello, SG. How are you?
Hey, doing well. Thank you for having me back. Good to be here.
Oh, of course. Mi casa, su casa, right?
I have to say, one of the things that I enjoy about coming on with you, Jenny, is the platform is always very homey and it's very conversational. And I think that's really, really helpful in this great awakening time. So thank
Oh,
you.
well, thank you. Oh, well, thank you, SG. I mean, you are definitely one of these voices, the calm in the storm, right? And I was just talking to the audience, and I always tell the audience, be careful who you listen to, who you follow, and what you're putting in your mind, because it's always been a little bit crazy out there, but it's a wild, wild west right now. I go into a lot of these, whether they're chats or X spaces or whatever, and just kind of listen to see what they're putting out there. And there's just a lot of, excuse my language, but it is what it is, a lot of bullshit being put out there. So it's good for somebody like you that's consistent in what you say. And I tell the audience that too. Listen to the people that are consistent, bringing you this, the good information, and they're very consistent with it. So because right now I can see where a lot of people can be getting really confused on who to follow, because they've been following this person for 3-4 years, and now all of a sudden they're jumping ship on Trump, or they're saying that, or they're saying this. So maybe since we're talking about that, can you want to touch on that real quickly, and we'll go into some of these other great things that are happening?
Yeah, that's actually a perfect place to start the conversation today. Is it's essentially revelation of the method in real time. And as you look at what's happening in the alternative ecosystem, especially the information ecosystems and the alternative spaces, I don't think you've got out and out nefariousness or insurgents, as we would call them from our side of the camp over here in what we'll call Anon land. But they are individuals or groups of individuals that are not yet free of the dynamic military-grade psychological mind control programming that has gone on for a number of decades just in its current form. And so as we look at what's happening around the world, that really is one of the underpinning, driving forces behind why things have to be done in a very specific way. It's not just about the changeover kinetically, but that's no less important. And that's yet another factor of why things have to go in a certain order, sort of along a certain timeline, with punctuation points along the way that have to occur in order to drive other events forward. But a main underlying force of a great deal of that on the other side of the coin is freeing humanity from the dream spell death grip that has been heaped literally into their consciousness by virtue of what they have seen, what they have heard, what they've witnessed and experienced in their lives. And so as we look at what's happening in the information ecosystem, Q said the end is not necessarily for everyone. And that's a multi-dimensional statement. I don't think it has to be a bad statement or have a negative connotation to it, but it does mean that if the end is not for everyone, in the sense of, when you go to a cinematic experience, then you have a whole different diverse group of variables that affect why some people may like it and why some others didn't. And so in other words, as you look at the sequence of events playing out, you have individuals in certain ecosystems inside business and finance, or others that are over in the mainstream information pulpit spaces, or even in the alternative media pulpit spaces that don't fully understand, that are not grasping what the true essence, the true meaning of this experience is all about. And that's why it is continually up to those awakened patriots, good researchers, Anons, and on-the-ground citizen journalists day in and day out to ensure that the truth, and nothing but the truth in its purest form, can get out there into the system to be counted amongst all of the rest of the rabble.
Oh, thank you for that, SG. Yes, I agree. You got to listen to the people that are staying consistent in what they're saying, everybody. And SG, do you think, I talked about this a little bit in one of my chats this morning about the legacy media. We knew that at some point they were going to be forced to tell the truth. And I do believe behind the scenes that they've pretty much already been taken over and kind of being told what to say, not to say, right? But do you think that's going to come out to the public, that they're basically they're done? I mean, I think we're starting to see that to the public. But a lot of us researchers know that this, I think, has maybe already happened behind the scenes. Can you maybe touch on that a little bit too?
I absolutely can. What you're witnessing with respect to the mainstream media particularly is a forced exposure, in other words, a forced confession and admittance of what has happened here, and also a simultaneous preparation for the public mass consciousness to have all of these different trusted names in news completely removed and revoked from the airwaves. And President Trump has already admitted as much when he suggested not once but twice on Truth Social in the last 8 to 9 months, I think this is the time frame for this, that the federal government should pull the broadcasting licenses of certain media groups based on political bias, and essentially acting as unelected arms or participative, complicit third parties in aiding a political system. And that's not allowed in the United States, right? Media and the press cannot aid the political side one way or another. The free press has to be the free press, or we don't have a constitutional system at all. And so what we're seeing, and especially through the exposure of President Trump using fake news and discussing fake news even just over these last few weeks, as we've talked about certain stories like Epstein and others. This is a continual beating on the consciousness that the news, the information that people have been consuming by way of these so-called trusted outlets and trusted forms of information dissemination, it's not been news at all, but it's been one-sided propaganda, and in many cases it's been outright fabrication, and that amounts to treason, sedition, and conspiracy to overthrow the government of the United States. And Q tells us, when we go online and we look at the boards, that the mainstream media is implicated. In other words, they are a core part of the highest level treason event in modern U.S. history. And so when you look at that, and we see President Trump putting out just yesterday, I think overnight and into this morning, it might have been earlier this morning, this post again inviting the public to weigh in and sort of gauge the public temperature on charging former President Obama with treason as a traitor. In other words, a crime against the Republic, a crime against the Constitution. This is a major, major thing to happen for the population to witness and see. I think you're also going to see all of the arms that facilitated that coup, and that included the mainstream media, the entirety of the Democrat National Convention, a great number of individuals involved in the Congress at the Democrat side, and many on the Republican side as well. This entire situation that comes back to Obama and then will eventually lead into other places also. This is the spider web that ties it all together. They really, truly never thought that she was going to lose. And so they were very brazen during the Obama years about what they were doing and what they were willing to do to the incoming president. And it has become the setup for their extinction event.
Yeah, it's pretty sick what they wanted to do to him and all of us. Okay, that segues right into my next question for you, SG, regarding Obama. John Solomon has come out basically saying that Obama can now be summoned for grand jury, but cannot plead the fifth because he has immunity for prosecutions. Excuse me. So how do you see this playing out? As I see it as like a trap, because he has to tell the truth, right?
Well, he does, and it gets a little complicated in the legal sense. Probably a little bit of it's going to be above my pay grade. But when we look at the presidential immunity contention, and President Trump has, of course, put that out and sort of primed the public for, hey, this is a former president. We've got immunity. We can't just throw that away. I think that's a very salient and sage point for President Trump to make in this process. We all want justice, but it has to set a replicatable precedent as we go forward that does not hamper our constitutional system, and we have to keep that in mind. So looking at what's going on, excuse me, with President Obama, and I apologize, Jenny, I got completely off track here. A bird just landed on the side of the mirror here, and then completely stole my train of thought. Bring me back to the question if you could.
Don't feel bad. I came out of a space before I started this one, and I was so tongue-tied with my PSAs. I was all over the place. But anyway, so no, I was just saying that John. Yes.
Presidential immunity.
Yes.
All right. Let me jump back on that thought. Thank you for that. So the Supreme Court, when they issued that ruling with respect to what was happening with Trump, and they reinforced presidential immunity, all of us sort of took that as a double-edged sword kind of win. There's a little bit of bitterness. There's a lot of sweetness there. And we can sort of deal with that as we go forward in the system. But in the language of that order, the court did make allocations, and I forget the exact language, but it was a couple of sentences right in the middle where they made allocations for conduct that was considered manifestly criminal or something along those lines. And so when you look at the ruling for immunity, even the ruling from the SCOTUS makes an allowance to remove that immunity if the president is part of a serious criminal action that is obvious and that is sort of incontestable on its face. And so what do we have saturating the entirety of the airwaves right now? Exactly that type of public narrative preparation that would be needed to take a ruling to SCOTUS and perhaps have SCOTUS strip the immunity from the former president in preparation for something like a military tribunal. And President Trump has told us that that is eventually going to come, because he's put out not once, not twice, but I think it's 3 separate times now on his Truth Social post, on his Truth Social profile, inviting the public to weigh in on the idea of a televised military, a public military tribunal for Obama and all of those that assisted in Russiagate.
I say, let's go. All right. Okay. Here's my last question. Then everybody, I'm going to go into the audience questions. So if you guys have a question for SG, he is limited on time today. Everybody, please feel free to start raising your hands or write your questions in the comment box on the wall underneath his logo. So, okay. So we know he went to Scotland for this huge European deal, the EU deal, I think one of the biggest ones in human history. And I see it as we are watching the art of war, the art of the deal being played out. Can you talk a little bit about that and how you foresee this? I mean, it's going to benefit the United States hugely, but can you kind of talk about that for the audience?
Well, absolutely. The issue with Scotland is just very, very interesting. It's one that I'm not as deep into it as I would like to be, but I've gotten, my feet and ankles and knees wet a little bit with it. President Trump has a fascinating lineage going back to the Scottish Crown, essentially. And when we talk about the Scottish Crown, we're talking about the last we the people ruler in what is the modern day British Isles before they were subjugated by the English Crown, which came into service of the Vatican and the Knights Templars very, very quickly after that subjugation process. As a matter of fact, it was in process at the time that occurred. And so looking at what's happening in the present day and time, and especially with the opening of this new golf course, I'm not sure how many of your audience out there noticed that at the top of the sign that Eric Trump had installed, it looked like a thankful, and an appreciative message for Donald Trump, and regarding the dedication of the golf course and the opening of it, and had the date at the bottom. It had the seal at the top of the golf course itself, and that seal takes a great deal of inspiration from the old Scottish crown seals of the 11 and 1200s. And so when you look at what's happening, not only did we have that opened up with this very significant symbolic homage paid to that group of individuals that existed pre-English occupation in the early parts of the, I think it was about the 12th and 13th centuries, if my history serves me right. Don't quote me exactly on that, but somewhere in that arena, we've got this homage paid to that group of individuals that existed prior to that occupation and conquering of the Scottish crown. And we have President Trump hosting members of the English government, right, at this new property. And so this is something that I think cannot be overstated in the sense that we are having a walking in front of the Queen moment once again. It's not quite as obvious. It is a little bit more subtle, but it is no less symbolic. We are meeting the leaders of foreign governments, and specifically that regional areas governments, and also the representatives of that same crown faction that did the conquering about 1,000 years ago, a little bit less than 1,000 years ago, coming to the reinstalled rightful ruler, if you will, the rightful bloodline to be in control of that area of the world, and with respect to this broader military alliance, having control of a great deal of sway with money, commerce, finance, power, and things of that nature. And it's happening in real time right in front of our eyes.
Wow, that's impressive. All right, everybody, we're going to go to some questions here. So here's one from, here's a couple here on the board, SG, from 80s Chick. Question: I have seen food manufacturers in the stores. Are these the companies that are now producing the clean foods? I've seen it as well.
Honestly, I'm not 100% sure, but I saw that at my own local grocery store not very long ago. And so this is a topic that I'm going to be investigating quite a bit more. I'll probably address it on an upcoming file. I'm going to be putting out more files going into the early part of August and going through the month of August. So that's a topic that's probably going to circle back around. I don't want to speculate above my pay grade because the issue of the cleanliness of our food, water, and air is very, very dear to me.
Yeah, I'm right there with you, SG. When it's time to eat, it's like, really, what am I going to eat now? Everything's bad for us, right? Okay, here's another one from Real Gabby. What can we do in our communities to encourage the woke to listen to us when God opens the door to speak? Yes, we always pray. That's from Gabby. So basically, what can we do in our communities to encourage the woke to listen to us?
I'm going to assume from the question that when we say woke, we're talking about those that are pretty far left of center on the aisle and are having just a time of it shedding that mind control programming and gaslighting. And I find that in my own, the course of my own everyday life, if I get into charged issues, anything where there's going to be a significant emotional response that's likely, it usually doesn't go anywhere at all. But if I approach it from the status of mutual suffering or mutually having our system removed from our control, everyone sort of grasps that a little bit, and it takes the sting away from it being so hyper-focused on issues that everyone has an opinion about. But fundamentally, at the core, all of us want to be free beings. We want to be able to make our own choices, to live a self-determinative life, to go after the American dream if we wish to do so, as long as we're keeping with the social compact and respecting the laws of our land. Everyone pretty much should have the right, and I think intrinsically wants the right, to self-determine their own life trajectory and pathway. And so when I approach them from that angle, whether it's the Federal Reserve having control of our money supply and inflating our dollar to into a poverty level asset worldwide, whether it is the control of our local bakeries, our local businesses, our local eateries, establishments, grocers. At one point in time, there were local fuel and petrol stations around the United States, right? That arena, having that corporatized and taken away from the control of the communities, and having these communities subservient and essentially forced to do business with and participate in the commercial model with these organizations that have no interest in their community, that pay very little tax in their community because their headquarters and main place of operations is somewhere else. These are relatable issues that people come around to, and those prime the pump for the deeper issues. Did you know that certain corporations are really truly controlled by people that actually worship evil? I've used that term a couple of times before. They really do believe that what they're doing, maximizing profit over people, is something that they should do with respect to their ideology. And that's I've seen that give off some light bulbs before. I've also seen it give me pushback. So you sort of have to gauge where someone is at and how willing they are to go into the more nuanced conversations. And as the mind control begins to wear off and fade and thin, and they begin connecting some dots, it will set up a chain reaction process neurologically in the brain, because curiosity feels good. If you've ever seen a second grader or a third grader or a fourth grader, it's like you can't give them enough information. It feels good to learn something. They want to become aware of something else. And that trait, while suppressed in most American adults and across our population due to the environment that we've been in, it's fundamentally a very human trait, and it can be activated for the good.
Thank you, SG. Also, too, here, question for me. We're seeing the Jerome Powell and Donald Trump situation going on. Trump's kind of going scorched earth on Jerome Powell, as he should. I mean, he got caught, right? What do you foresee happening with this? A lot of people he's going to step down. Jerome Powell's going to get fired by Trump. Well, Trump's not going to fire him. He already came out and said that. But what do you see in the coming days happening? Because we know that I think things are going to get a little sticky in that situation.
I think Jerome Powell and Adam Schiff are going to have similar problems as we go forward, because if we want to look at an organization that is complicit in financial fraud of the highest order and corruption of the highest order, quite literally the organization that creates the game board for that corruption to occur, it is the Federal Reserve. And as we look at the conspiratorial and nepotistic nature of the financial apparatus inside the U.S. government, with respect to the regulation of currency, commerce, and the actual coffers and treasury of the United States government, I think we're going to get into the weeds in a pretty significant way. I think the investigations that are going to come from things like mortgage and financial fraud, bribery activities inside of Congress, insider stock trading, which, if we see this current bill moving through the Senate, if it moves through and actually passes a common Senate vote and gets its way through the House and through the president's desk, we would have new precedent and legal precedent set forth from that point in time to go after anyone participating in insider trading. We know that some of them will probably be arrogant and brazen enough to try that anyway. So all of this, I think, is going to come back to forcing a broader judicial action that's going to reclaim or reclaims maybe not the right word for it, but provide a significant amount of public pressure, enough for the Congress to act in the interest of the American Treasury, quite frankly. And so when we look at the Federal Reserve Act, for example, that act was not even constitutionally or congressionally passed. It did not meet the threshold for a congressional quorum, even in the post-constitutional system of the United States Civil War in the mid-19th century. And so what we've got fundamentally is we've already got precedent, and we can prove that this situation with respect to this law on the books may not be all that it's supposed to be. If that ties back to a broader conspiracy to defraud the American public, either through mortgage fraud, through bribery, or high crimes and misdemeanors, however it ends up going through, I think you're going to see a significant number of individuals, Mr. Powell amongst them, caught up in the oversight of investigations and continual public shaming for a period of time. It may take a few weeks or a few months, depending on how quickly some of these things get off the ground. We have to keep in mind also, while we talk about this particular issue, the Fed is also going to be implicated in all of the financial criminality that happened with respect to the broader Russiagate conspiracy itself. And that conspiracy, according to individuals inside the administration that have given source revelations to certain independent journalists out there, there is a massive, and I think John Solomon was one of them, there's a massive investigation that goes back all of the way to the beginning of the 2016 election with respect to Russiagate and the conspiracy to overthrow a sitting president, a duly elected and incoming sitting president of the United States. And so we could see some of that overlap into this current landscape with the mortgage fraud and the financial fraud, because how do you fund treason? How do you fund these types of high dollar black budget activities? You have to pay for thousands of assets. You have to move tremendous amounts of equipment around. You have to have certain equipment activated to cover up or create a smoke screen for other equipment that you've got activated, which itself is not cheap to operate. So as we look at how these things tie together, I think you're going to see public pressure and public shaming eventually force judicial action and potentially congressional action to dissolve the Federal Reserve Bank.
Thank you, SG. All right, everybody, I'm going to call on hands. So if you guys have a question for SG, please feel free to raise your hand. I will unmute your mic. So go ahead, John Sawmiller. Your mic is unmuted. Go ahead, John. Go ahead, John. Your mic is unmuted. SG is limited on time today, guys, so please be mindful. Go ahead, John. Okay, I got to move on. Go ahead, Linda Hendrickson. Go ahead, Linda.
Thank you for what you do, both of you. What does SG think about the 2020 election, and when are we going to learn the truth?
Well, that's a fascinating question and a phenomenal question. I think you're going to see, and I hate to sound repetitive or redundant, but remember, it all comes back to the same congealed blob, the same spider web of actors, the same spider web of criminal investigations for different situations, circumstances, scenarios, and things that have occurred. The 2020 election represents, in my opinion, the apex of the 2016 to 2020 coup, between that and the biological event called COVID-19. And we could talk forever about that one. But the particulars of the 2020 election, President Trump has told us numerous times that the current Justice Department, not just Bondi, but most of the individuals, or a great deal of the individuals that are at Bondi's disposal, are investigating exactly that. They're investigating the 2024 and the 2020 election from the federal level. As we go forward with these other investigations that are also being handled by U.S. attorneys and assistant attorneys across the entirety of the nation, with respect to mortgage fraud as one example, with respect to Russiagate specifically, that happens to be the one that's grabbed a lot of the news recently, but it's not the only one on the table. And we still have a significant amount of Justice Department activity, even though we're being given this sort of song and dance smokescreen with respect to the Epstein scenario. All of us know that there's a great deal of realism and real concern there that ties back to national security. And there is an investigative effort in the Virgin Islands that has ballooned from 4 prosecutors to 29 prosecutors in the last 6 years. And so what's going on there, in many regards, people are speculating that it ties back to JP Morgan, which ties back to Epstein, which ties back also to big oil, big biotech, big Silicon Valley. It's a very huge, web there. And I hate to, sort of create this Venn diagram, but there's just so many angles that come back to what happened with the 2020 election. And so as we see this revelation brought forth through these investigative efforts, which seem to be happening very rapidly, as we look at the information space, in January, we were sort of coming out of this, Biden dysphoria that had been created throughout these last 4 years in the United States of America. And now we're having a public discourse about Obama committing treason against the American people. This is just we're 6 or 7 months in now. So as we go forward over this, the remainder of this summer and into this fall, I'm expecting significant revelations about a number of areas. The 2020 election, not necessarily fully adjudicated yet, but certainly priming the public for a complete overturn, perhaps a case that goes to SCOTUS. There's a couple of cases actually that are still sitting at SCOTUS about that election that have never even been ruled on. One way or another, and they've not been dismissed by the justices either. It's not just the Brunson brothers. There are several cases that tie back to fraud at the federal and state level in the 2020 election. None of those have been ruled on yet. We have the situation from healthcare, from the jab point of view, and certain health symptoms and side effects and things like that. We've been promised answers with respect to that arena of our society by this coming September. I would expect by year's end, we're going to have significant revelations about problematic areas of our society. And if not the 2020 election, certainly the malfeasance of the 2024 election is going to be in the public discourse by November, with 2020 not far behind.
Awesome.
Thank you, Rusty.
I've lost jobs in healthcare because I didn't agree with stuff. And it's like, you know, I was making like $20 an hour. Not bad, you know, because where I live. I'm so frustrated with trying to get ahead and never able to.
I completely understand. And I am sorry to hear that, Patriot, but I got to say, I really appreciate your courage to not kowtow to what is serious tyranny in our system. Thank you for that.
Oh, thanks.
Thank you, Linda. Thank you, Linda.
You're welcome.
All right, Miss Gloria, your mic is unmuted. Go ahead. Go ahead, Gloria. Your mic is unmuted. Okie dokie. All right. Is it Rolber? Or what is it? Lieutenant? I don't know. Rolber Fedor? Your mic is unmuted. Got to get better names, people. Rolber Fedor, your mic is unmuted. I hope I'm not saying that wrong, but I think I probably am. Okay, we don't have. Okay, all right. SG, since these people aren't answering, can we touch a little bit on the? Okay, so let's talk about the tsunami, the earthquake. So we had an 8.8 out there, you know, in Russia, and then obviously, you know, created this huge tsunami. A lot of warnings for the West Coast over here, you know, Hawaii. We did see it hit pretty hard in Japan, and I think Hawaii, Maui reported a 4-foot wave that landed. Can you talk a little bit? Because I was doing a little bit of research. I haven't validated it yet, but I don't know if you've heard it or not, that where the epicenter of the earthquake was, the 8.8, apparently it hit a Russian submarine base. Do you know anything about that? And then you can talk about the earthquake, tsunami, all that fun stuff.
Well, I'd be happy to. I think what you're seeing with this, and I want to highlight the symbolism of the 88 here in just a second, because that's a very obvious, you know, telltale sign of what's occurring here with that shadow warfare. But I think what you're seeing with respect to this earthquake happening, and especially where it happened and at the time frame of it, it happened literally 24 hours after President Trump issued a 10 to 12 day ultimatum to President Putin. At the same time, we have Russia rolling out in their national strategic outlook coming, if I'm not mistaken, it's supposed to be rolled out in this September or October, a blueprint plan, a framework to bring cryptocurrency into the BRICS nations bloc, including XRP. And so what we're seeing fundamentally is the build out of an alternative ecosystem spearheaded in many ways, or ballasted maybe is the better way to say it, by the development inside the BRICS bloc of nations in their area and regional territories around the world, simultaneous with a resetting that's going on inside of the Western world bloc that ties back to Wall Street, the Federal Reserve, London, Rome, etc. And so President Trump's timing with the issuing this ultimatum to Moscow, everyone sort of is misreading a little bit of that. The people that are actually feeling the pressure as a result of that ultimatum are not the Russians. The Russians have been in a position to go ahead and wind this up under certain conditions for a long time, and they're ready to do so. But Kiev has not wanted to stop the bloodshed, has not wanted to stop the entirety of the conflict itself for one reason or another. We know that there's a lot of special operations happening in the backdrop against the fog of war with this actual, the warfare that's being waged on the ground in Ukraine. But fundamentally, you now have Kiev, which is essentially a CIA vassal state, unable to stop what we'll call patriotic military forces from destroying serious money-making black market infrastructure that they have in Ukraine, like entire laboratories for rapid organ harvesting, for example. And at the same time, they cannot prevent the Russians from beating them at the surface level, and what we're seeing more on the screens, more in the daily of everyday life, and forcing the Russians to give their final conditions for a settlement inside of a period of time would force Kiev to come back to the table. And if they refuse to come back to the table, you're going to have an immediate public narrative shift in the entirety of the developed world about what's happening inside Ukraine, you're also going to lose the cooperation of the office of the presidency here in the USA. And so what we have, in my opinion, Jenny, is Russia quite literally being punished for spearheading or being the fulcrum on which a great deal of this is swinging away from the control of the deep state Khazarian cabal and into the control of patriotic We the People cultural forces all around the planet, many of them representing their own nation states at the military and diplomatic level. And so it's interesting how this occurred, because now you have a significant amount of disaster resources that have to be allocated to, clear across to the other side of the continent, to facilitate the recovery from this event over there near the Kamchatka Peninsula. At the same time that we have one of the high risk moments for a false flag spurred by NATO on the western end in the European side of Russia, potentially in southwest Russia near the Kursk region, where we've already had an incursion from NATO-aligned Ukrainian forces and NATO ground forces, according to the Russians, already once in this warfare period. And now I want to talk a little bit about the symbolism with this, because this is how I think we know that this is a back and forth that is also resulting in total decimation of our opponent, right? We had an 8.8 earthquake strike this area and create this sort of havoc that it has created. But at the same time that it created this havoc, it also allowed for a tremendous amount of movement around the rest of the planet to happen in real time. There's a meeting with the Iraq parliament that's supposed to be coming up in the next couple of weeks. They're discussing a publicly visible revaluation of their internal resources. So that's going to be essentially the confirmation that many Anons and Awake Patriots have wanted for a long time, that there is a massive financial recalibration that is going to heal some of the areas of the world that we here in America would think of as war-ravaged or third world hellholes that are never going to be able to get their feet underneath them. That is going to be proven wrong as we go through this process, and publicly visible proof of that is about to be coming right around the corner. At the same time, we saw two 88-foot flagpoles planted in the ground at the White House just earlier this summer. I think it was during the spring season, and a pretty significant flag dedication ceremony. And these flags do not have gold fringes on them. So this is literal reclamation of the soil beneath the White House, which is tantamount to a declaration of victory, planting one's flag in a conquered territory and claiming it for oneself. That's literally what we've witnessed just in the last few months in this process. We also had the Pope pass away at age 88 and Klaus Schwab retire from the WEF at 88 years old. When we look at the Back to the Future movies, I don't need to get into the weeds explaining how 88 is significant with that. For folks out there, just go and watch the movie. It's pretty self-explanatory, but it ties back, I think, to this idea of resetting the world in a positive manner. Is there pain to be had along the way? Yes. Was this likely a black hat attack using weaponry that's not been mapped, identified, and destroyed yet in this process? Very likely that it was. Does it serve the purpose, however, of driving the consciousness forward? And does it also serve the purpose of creating a fog of war smokescreen for patriotic actors to move the needle forward in very significant ways? Yes, it absolutely does. We just had a grand jury in Chile rule that the former Pinochet dictatorial government has to return 16 million US dollars, which is a tremendous amount of Chilean money. I'm not sure the conversion factor, but it's an enormous amount. It's in the billions of Chile's currency back to the treasury of their nation, and they have until tomorrow to make that process, to essentially establish that process and get it underway. So these types of actions happening in the background, behind these types of massive world-grabbing, attention-grabbing events, we have to keep in mind the look here, not there still applies. And even when we look at, fielding the attacks that are coming from our opponents, not only does that create a window for us to now go and destroy whatever equipment or machinery or pulpit was used to execute that attack, but it also provides yet another gigantic horse-sized red pill for anyone who's starting to wake up.
So, okay, so real quickly, to the back to, and then I want to talk about August 1st real quickly. Back to the 8.8 earthquake. So, do you believe that was not natural, or was that natural?
I don't think that we can say that was natural in any form. The symbolism itself, you would have a hard time selling the idea that it was inorganic. But the fact that it was less than 100 nautical miles from Russia's largest Pacific coast Pacific Theater Naval Base, and also one of the naval bases that hosts their Arctic boomer nukes. I think we have to keep in mind that, again, this is clearly a hampering technique being shot out there into the forefront of the space to try and redirect or tie down some of Russia's attention and resources, perhaps because of what they're doing with respect to the introduction of cryptocurrency into their landscape and the BRICS nations in the coming months and couple of years ahead of us.
So a lot of distractions, everybody, and we've been saying it often. Like SG says, that still applies. Look here when we should be looking over there. This just got to stay focused, everybody. Okay, and then SG, and then a Southern gal, or Patty, you can go after this question. You kind of touch a little bit on August 1st, not a lot, you just mentioned it, but can you maybe talk a little bit, in your opinion, to the audience about August 1st? You were talking about, things that need to start being paid back. I think you said August 1st, right? Or did you say tomorrow? Tomorrow's the 31st, right? But I think we're talking about August 1st. Can you talk a little bit more about August 1st and what that could mean to American people? Because I think they heard Trump on the tarmac talking to a reporter, asking if they were a citizen, and if they were a citizen, they were going to be very happy. So can you maybe kind of elaborate in your opinion on that as well?
I'd be happy to. I want to preface my elaboration here by saying that I've not had a chance to fully read into this, but I did see the statement that President Trump made. And we have to keep in mind that President Trump oftentimes will tell us things, and the meaning could be contrived in an immediate sense, or the meaning could be contrived in a few weeks to a couple months, down the road sort of sense. I think some of it depends on how quickly things can move inside the entirety of the government. There's still the concern of infiltrative parties that are constantly trying to claw back to those pulpits and prevent this agenda from moving forward in a lot of ways. But with respect to the 31st deadline in Chile, which is what I was talking about just a moment ago, that could very well be tied back to some sort of broader continental financial conglomeration that is going to come just as much as we've got the African Union and the BRICS nations, for example. And South America happens to be a very, very corrupt and very dirty playground of the intelligence community. It's been kept out of the media in a lot of ways over the last 50 to 75 years. You'll see occasionally, press releases or things like that, or investigative reports coming out of South America. If you look at anything over the last 5 decades, they're essentially all quite damning and very difficult to read in many respects. And so that's a playpen that, the fact that we have such a ruling coming from a Chilean grand jury, and the grand jury members themselves have not been carted off into the mountains by now, I think that tells us a lot of what we need to know about how that control has been leveraged and moved. And if we're returning assets to a treasury, and Chile is not the only one to do this, Argentina did it in a different way when they brought Milei to power, and Milei basically flipped the economy on its head and restored a lot of Argentinians' treasure. And he's still in the process down there. We just don't see it in the news much, of going after corruption and individuals that have been involved in generational corruption inside Argentina. So all of this, in my opinion, Jenny, is preparing us for some sort of significant event, perhaps an influx of something, or a change in trade dynamics in a major way, to be achieved after the 1st of August. Q tells us online that August is traditionally a very hot month, and we've seen a flavor of that basically every year since the Q drop started. Some significant event happening in August. The raid on Mar-a-Lago happened on the 8th of August, 88. The fires in Maui happened on the 8th of August. That's another 88. We saw the Hawaiian Islands impacted, by the tsunami situation that occurred. Granted, it's not nearly quite the impact of what happened in Maui. It's a much more manageable impact, but an impact nonetheless. And so, a lot of it, I think, is priming the public for whatever change President Trump has in mind. And I think that's the essence of your question. And I don't want to speculate above my pay grade. I couldn't tell you if it's tariff related, or if there's a serious bombshell that's going to drop very soon. We've seen this investigation about this conspiracy published by a couple of different, what I would say relatively reputable semi-mainstream journalists. I mean, John Solomon has broad appeal nationwide to a very large and diverse demographic of individuals that are sort of right of center on the aisle. And so for him and others to be talking about this grand conspiracy investigation, perhaps we see something from that investigation coming after the 1st of August that's going to be a significant leap forward in how things happen domestically in the United States. I don't want to speculate when I don't have a good picture of what is going to come with that. But with President Trump's focus on that and other events that have been happening around the world, the Ukrainian conflict, for example, and all of the money laundering that's been happening there, 10 days from the deadline that President Trump gave, which I think he issued a day or two ago, would put us just after the 1st of August, really at the end of the first week of August. So we could see something transpire in that period of time. I just don't know.
Thank you, SG. Appreciate that. Okay, Patty, go ahead. Your mic is unmuted.
Hi, Jenny. And it's always a pleasure
Hello.
to hear you speak, SG. Always a pleasure. I always enjoy listening to you. You're a wealth of knowledge. My question for you is, what do you think, and I know it would be speculative and it would be your opinion, that what is it going to take in the country's climate for people to really realize that we are back into the republic, something that we have no knowledge of in our lifetimes, and no longer in the corporation? What do you think that's going to, what does that look like to you in your opinion?
I think that is, in my opinion, if I was to war game it myself and try to plan out how best to take the nation to that level, I think it would have to come by way of money. All of us have suffered tremendously by way of money at one point or another. Many still out there suffering, with the economic conditions that have been created in our nation because we are not a true republic, because we are a business entity that is able to instill internal policies, much like a Kmart does, on how their employees work and how their internal, financials and accounts payable and things like that will be handled. We're in the exact same situation at a nation state level. And I think the issue of the Federal Reserve Bank is going to be the gateway for how we introduce this broad idea that the monetary control of our nation was taken away from us and placed in the hands of a business entity that then masqueraded as our nation in front of our eyes for 100 and I guess it's 50 years at this point, just over 150 years. And I could see the nation coming around as a result of going that direction, concurrent with some of these other actions that we've talked about, some of these other public accountabilities that we've talked about on the call today, like, President Obama and the situation with Russiagate. Who funds a coup of a government? Typically, it's another government or a fraudulent government, an insurgent government, right? The corporation government of the United States has been an insurgency since at the very least the late 1860s, early 1870s. It's sort of murky prior to the Civil War because so much was damaged and destroyed in that conflict. But looking as we go forward here, I could see the banking system and especially the reshaping of finance alongside corruption investigations and perhaps congressional actions toward the Federal Reserve Bank, resulting in revelations for the American public that at one point in time would be thought unthinkable.
Wow, thank you. I knew you would explain it to where I could understand it. So it's basically the bank needs to go. The system we've always known needs to go.
If you shut down a corporation, the very last place and the place of total finality is their financial department. And so as we go through this period of time, as we reclaim the system, reclaiming our monetary control and control of our internal domestic currency will be the final nail in the coffin, I think, for the broader awakening about what you were asking.
Thank you so much, sir. Have a great week.
You too.
Thank you, Patty. All right, Miss Vicky, your mic is unmuted. Go ahead.
Thank you so much for calling on me, Jenny.
Of course.
SG, it's always a pleasure to hear you. I would like to confirm my understanding of some things you said rolled into a question. I'm hearing you say, essentially, we're in checkmate. They've lost, but there are still moves on the board. And it looks like I'm hearing you say a lot of the moves are related to not just financial, but the weather modification stuff. With the earthquake possibly being a black hat operation. Have you noticed that a lot of the NORAD and other things used for weather modification seem to have diminished over the last week to 10 days? And do you see it as being less and less of a problem over time? Thank you.
Well, Vicky, I have to say that's a fantastic question to start closing things out because I'll be coming up on time here in just a minute. But you've touched on an area that's actually going to be included in one of the upcoming audio files, and that is what appears to be a control operation or a reclaiming of control inside the weather modification apparatus of NEXRAD, which I think is what you were talking about a moment ago here in the domestic United States and especially Alaska. And one of the things that is interesting, and I haven't had a chance to investigate this particular earthquake event, but one of the earthquakes with Turkey that happened just, I think it was last year, about midsummers of last year. So it was a significant earthquake, 6 or 7 on the Richter scale. The entirety of the NextRad apparatus here in the domestic United States of America was lit up almost at the same time, at the time that that particular earthquake was occurring. And with what I have watched over the last 12 months, less and less of those pockets of NextRad seem to be activating all simultaneously with one another. And when they're not simultaneously activated, they're essentially useless and ineffective, because it's not just a linear drop in force. You're talking about frequency modulation at the atmospheric level. So you can create exponential differences or exponential increases or decreases depending on what is on or offline. And certain areas may have much more influence with respect to how their frequencies get out into the atmosphere based on their altitude or based on the atmospheric conditions where they're at than others. And what I've noticed specifically is that the ones, talking about altitude, the ones that I used to watch over the southern Rocky Mountains that would light up almost every single time there was a significant weather event in the LA basin or across southern Nevada and in northern Arizona, they are no longer lighting up when those events are occurring. And so, looking at what's happening, you were talking about the broader public narrative, I think was the essence of your question, sort of this exposure of different significant things happening to the public, such as the U.S. corporation, the weather modification, things of that nature. I think that we're going to get into that as we go through investigative processes for more, what I would characterize more surface level issues, like what's actually causing the health crisis in the United States. And Bobby Kennedy has confirmed publicly a number of times now on X from his own official profiles and accounts, personal and official profiles and accounts, that he is aware of what chemtrailing is. He's aware that it is a crime. He's called it a crime. And he's also said that we're going to put a stop to it. But there is a significant overlap inside that arena with DOD. And, DOD sort of serves to be the stick in the mud pie at different points along the way, because DOD does have certain areas of national security that really should be mostly closed off for general public consumption, because you do have hostile forces still implanted, not only in our government, but in other governments, who could do us great harm if they had access to that information or some of those operations. So I know it's a long answer to your question, but it's to describe it as checkmate might be just a tad bit premature. I would say this is the longest chess end game that I've ever seen played out. And I'm a chess player myself. I love chess. The end game situation can go all of the way up to half of the game length, depending on how skilled two opponents are, with pinning one another down or escaping from a pin that's strategically being planned along the way. And it can be an arduous process, but it always does come to a conclusion. And I think as we look over the last 12 months especially, we are certainly winning that end game.
Thank you, Vicky. Did that answer your question?
Yes, it did. I don't see it as, it's checkmate, but there's still moves
Moves on
left
the
on the
board.
board. That's all I was
Absolutely.
saying. But your
Moves
answer
and
was
counter
perfect.
moves.
Thank you.
Moves and counter moves, right? All right, SG, it's always lovely to have you here. I always look forward to your shows. You're just an amazing voice, and so articulate, and just that calm. So I want to say thank you so much for being here every month. I've already reached out to Laura to get you scheduled on back for your next show, because you know me, that's how I do it. I don't waste any time. But you
Absolutely.
have a great weekend. God bless you. Love you, SG. And congratulations on your new move. And I know it's probably not wanted, but congratulations. Things happen for a reason, right?
Amen. Thank you for having
All
me
right.
back, Jenny.
Of course. And we'll talk to you guys soon. Have a great rest of your day, evening, wherever you're at. And God bless everybody. Thanks, SG.
God bless all. Good night.